Well, good evening, everybody. Alan Slaughter-Zinski for the Brevard Sports Network. And as we wind into the real break here coming up over the next couple of days, and by the way, happy 4th of July weekend to you and all of yours out there. And please be careful over the weekend for you student athletes. Camps open up the very last Monday of this month, I believe. So we want everybody there safe and sound. So please have a great weekend, but have a safe weekend. And here to kind of take a quick look back at maybe last year a little bit and look ahead, more importantly, is the Brevard County Public Schools top athletic director. The last time we had this gentleman on as a guest, he was just taking the job 2 years ago, and now he'll be going into his third fall sports season. I believe third fall sports season with this. Please help me welcome back to Brevard Sports Network, Mr. Kevin Robinson. Kevin, welcome, and how have you been, sir?
Pretty good. Things have been going well. We're into the summer and heavy into the prep for next season, next year, the whole thing like that. Trying to adapt to new changes. This is the time of the year where there's a lot of changes going on, and a lot of shuffling going on, and adapting to new policies and legislative changes. So, yeah.
So the first 2 years, I know when we had you here the last time, it was like, you knew what to expect, but you didn't know what you were going to be walking into. So, looking back over your first 2 years, kind of what did you learn that's kind of shaped your way heading into year three?
So it's hard to believe it's been 2 years already, since I took this position. It's kind of, in the beginning, I think like we talked about is drinking from a fire hose in the beginning.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that going on, and that kind of settled its way down. So it's certainly been a journey filled with a lot of hard work and success, like it's long hours. So if I didn't love doing this, it probably wouldn't be that much fun, right?
Yeah.
You do put in a lot of work, a lot of hours, and any athletic director at any high school will tell you the same thing, but I'm really happy with what we've accomplished so far, in the past 2 years, but I think there's a lot more that we can still do.
What as you look back over these 2 years heading into your third, what are one or two of the things that you're proudest of that you have accomplished?
I would say there's a few different things. Probably the most biggest thing I'm proud of is being able to provide more opportunities. And I think we talked about this a couple of years ago.
Yep.
As one of the things that I wanted to do is being able to provide more sports opportunities for kids. So we've been able to, since I took over this job, we've been able to add, sports to, especially in particular, our elementary schools. Before this, there was no organized sports in elementary schools, so we added soccer and football to our sports offerings, and wow. They're kind of intramural sports where we get together and have a jamboree at the very end, and that's with their neighborhood schools. We had over 40 schools participating in either one or both sports this past school year, and those kids.
That's great.
A lot of those kids, Alan, would not have otherwise had that opportunity, and that's what's so important about this whole thing is a lot of kids are stuck in aftercare, and then maybe they have to wait for their parents to get off work, come pick them up, and then if they're lucky, they might be able to go to a community sport at night, a league sport somewhere at night. But quite honestly, a lot of parents aren't able to do that, due to their work schedule. So with this program, we were able to bring in and it's right there on school grounds. It's right there after school. So your coach is right there. They take you right out to the field and play games and run practices, things like that. So it's been really awesome to be able to have that. And I think it's really going to pay dividends long term. When it comes to once those kids start getting into middle school and high school, and start really kind of narrowing down and choosing the sports, but more than anything, kind of just falling in love with sports, where they might not have otherwise had the opportunity to play organized sports.
It's a great thing. It really is, because again, it starts to lay that foundation for that community pride, that school pride. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's been one of them. Another thing that we did was we created a full-time athletic trainer position at our 16 high schools. These are the people that look out for our athletes and their health and safety and well-being and everything like that while they're competing. So this is a key position, within our schools, and it was pretty difficult to get this position and get it in place and get it off the ground. And we're really close to having being fully staffed at all of our high schools. I mean, obviously, especially during the summertime, people come and go, but we're pretty close to getting those filled. And but there's still some work to be done in that area also. But I think I'm really happy with what we accomplished, in that regard. So
yeah, no doubt. Here, and I'll tell you what, it's a great stepping stone for these athletic trainers as well, to have something like that for their futures too. So not only for the health and well-being and safety of our student athletes, but that's a good thing for these trainers. Here with Kevin Robinson, the head athletic director for Brevard County Schools here. Well, let me ask you this. Usually when I see you, it's at a championship event, and we had a lot of great events happen this year in terms of high schools winning sports championships and things of that nature. Is there a moment this year in terms of maybe it was something at those elementary school games, or was there a couple of moments that stood out to you this year from a winning perspective for Brevard County?
Well, that's a good question, because there's a lot of things that one of the favorite parts of my job is that I get to go and watch our athletes compete for state championships.
Yeah.
That's the highlight of the whole year, for me. And so each season, we are fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do that. So this year, one that stands out, obviously the state championship game down in Miami with between Cocoa and Gadsden. That was a really good game. You were there. That was a really competitive game, and and between two really well coached teams, and the kids just fought really hard, and luckily Cocoa came out on top on that one, and that was really memorable. You were at the Palm Bay girls ball when they won the state championship, coming from behind to beat American Heritage. That was a pretty big one too.
What a game!
Yeah, those are awesome games. But I mean, we've just got so many talented athletes in this county. I mean, you look at swimming and diving and the state championships, the individual state championships and medals that we won there. Wrestling, the individual state championships that we won there, and the medalists and everything, and the track and field. Whoa, we had a lot of success there up at University of North Florida. So those are a lot of fun, those are a lot of fun to get to experience, and quite honestly, I just feel fortunate to be part of those, those championships and everything. So.
I know it's always a big event when I see you there, and I'm like, here we go. Let's get a winner here. You talked about the elementary school, the intramural, the games there. I got to tell you, watching the surge in popularity in sports like flag football and beach volleyball has been really quite remarkable. Caleb and I were in Miami this past weekend, Kevin, and we went down there and did a tournament of, I believe it was 14 teams from South Florida, and 30-some games were broadcast. We did. And all of those flag football teams were represented they came from different high schools in the area. I cannot believe the growth of that sport. Kind of talk about the popularity of the new sports and How hard is it to get a sport on the board?
It's really difficult. It takes a lot of. I mean, this is something we've been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And I think putting flag football and soccer, things like that, but especially flag football into the elementary school level is really key. And once we started doing that, now you've got the middle schools that are wanting flag football, and so now we're working on that end of it. You had the high schools that wanted flag football. A couple of the high schools wanted to start flag football because they were getting so much interest from their student population that it made sense to add those,
Sure,
get those going. A lot of the people in the community have been kind of calling for it also, and we've gotten a lot of help from local people, local partners. Gary Miracle has been awesome with helping us get our elementary flag football program off the ground, and kind of being almost in a expert kind of advisory role. I attended the National Athletic Directors Conference in Austin, Texas, and the NFL flag people were up there, and they were doing presentations, and got to talk to their people about the national vision. And this is something that's really, really taken off on the national level.
yes.
It's an Olympic sport now. It's going to be an Olympic sport for 28 in LA. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of growth potential with flag football in particular.
How
so
how does it?
out of that?
How does it? And I hate to throw this curveball at you, but obviously something like this that comes. I mean, look. There's no doubt in a couple of years a sport like flag football, from the girls and the boys standpoint, is going to be, you're going to have kids wanting to play it. And we've got already so many sports that lacrosse, you look at the springtime, or I mean, you almost have to play this sport when, I don't know. I don't know. You tell me. How can you accommodate for a sport like this in the future when it's going to have to be a sanctioned sport?
So, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Well, it's like almost in a couple of years, like flag football, it's one of those sports that's going to grow so much in popularity. If you read the reports, I read a report from the National Football League where, in terms from the high school and the collegiate level, a sport like flag football in 5 years will be played probably by every high school in states like California, Texas, and Florida. So considering that and the time of the year this sport might have to be played, let's say here in Florida in the spring, obviously you're going to have a ton of student athletes that want to do it. It's obviously going to take from other sports. How can you juggle that?
Well, there's always a concern there that you're gonna lose athletes, but from one sport to the next, there's always that concern. But when you look at it, if you look at the numbers, the overall number of athletes, I mean, if you're doing really good with your athletic programs, you're maybe tapping into 30% of your student body.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of growth potential there.
Yeah, it's true.
So when you offer a new sport, what you want to happen is people come out of the woodwork to play that sport who never even played a sport, but now you're offering a sport that they actually want to do and are interested in, right? So hopefully you're tapping into those kids, to get new athletes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. No, it does. And because you want to draw them out, and maybe this is just, they may not be any good at lacrosse or baseball or softball, but hey, man, this is something, they don't want to run track, but this is something that you're absolutely right. There are a ton of great student athletes that don't. And this is just yet another secondary sport that could, be something for their primary, because all great coaches, yourself included, always push for, play a secondary sport, be a 2 or 3 sport athlete if you can do it. I think that's fantastic. And I think it's a good problem to have from that standpoint, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here with Kevin Robb. Okay, so I know this is going to sound crazy, but I can't think of any other sports. Beach volleyball has grown unbelievably. Are there any other sports out there that we need to be aware of that might come up and hit us in the back of the head and come out of nowhere where we go, wow, where did that sport come from?
Yeah, so you talked about beach volleyball. We've had beach volleyball for a few years now,
right?
And that's largely thanks to Darren Bolton for really getting that off the ground and getting it going. We were able to hold Cape Coast Conference tournament for beach volleyball for the first time this year because we felt like we had enough teams to be able to do that. We had 13 competing schools in that Cape Coast Conference tournament, and and that was something that Darren and I talked about and at the beginning of the school year. And can we do it? And he said, yeah, I think we can do it. And he organized the whole thing and did a great job with it. And that it was a lot of success there. As far as new sports, things like that, we offer pretty much almost every sanctioned sport that the FHSA has to offer. There's a few that we don't, but there's not many. And a lot of it has to do with maybe facilities, different things like that. So
I'm just glad you didn't. I'm just glad you didn't say water polo.
There's a big push to build the numbers back up in water polo, but that's one of the ones that has those facilities challenges for everybody all across the state. Because obviously you got to have pools and pool time and everything like that. But yeah, it's that's.
If anybody wants to do water polo, do not expect to see Brevard Sports Network there. So you mentioned facilities, and look, I got to tell you, from 5 years ago to now, tracks, some of these weight rooms, I've seen a big time improvement in the facilities in Brevard. I mean, talking to Coach Alec of an astronaut, looking at that weight room, and of course, Coco's weight room went nationally a couple of years ago. But as you look across the county, I know there's still work to be done. Kind of take us through that a little bit and where we are in upgrading some of the facilities.
Yeah. So when it comes to those facility upgrades, things like that, I work closely with our facility services department and Suhan and those guys. And I'm actually my office is housed in the facility suite, which is extremely convenient when it comes to, working with those guys on those projects. Obviously that's all stuff that's mainly handled by our facility service, departments and project managers and construction and different things like that. That I act as like, I give my input and, kind of advise and from the athletic side,
gotcha.
Fill in that part of it and everything like that, so you kind of need the athletics mind and you need the construction mind, and that whole thing, we've, since I've been here and prior to me getting here too, I mean, we've invested millions and millions of dollars per year on athletic facilities. Obviously there's a lot more work to be done. But the tracks were a huge thing, getting the tracks put in. There's some other construction projects out there that, we talked about beach volleyball. We're constructing beach volleyball courts, things like that. We completed some at Space Coast. We got one that we're working on in Palm Bay right now. It's under construction currently, and it's going to be right just south of the softball field.
Oh, wow.
Where you get in right there. You've probably been out there.
Yeah, it's great location.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that are kind of being discussed also, but, funding has to be right and has to be in place. We every time I go out to places, I get more input, and that's kind of what I'm looking for,
And
I'm there to enjoy the game, but I'm also there to kind of talk to people and get input too.
And I want to say this too. And while it's great to have outlets like us and Space Coast Daily stream games and things like that, the most important thing I think that people need to understand is they need to put butts in seats on Friday nights and during the week, and get in there and support your local high schools, because the thing that still supports these high schools more than anything, Kevin, are the communities that surround them. And forever as the day is long, that community support is always going to be critical and crucial to the advancement and growth of each high school and middle school and elementary school. That still stands, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is so important. The community support is so important there. And so what I see is that the teams that have really good followings tend to have success, and then the success tends to build the following, right?
Correct.
So the kids love to see the fans filling the stands. It really brings home the importance. It builds that school spirit. It really makes for a good overall atmosphere, at the game. And certainly, if you're filling the stands, then, the ticket revenue's coming in, and that's what's going to help financially support the programs. Because, so another thing that we did too, and this was initiated just before I got here, but I had to take on the whole implementation role, if you will. Is that we the district pays for the officials. We pay for the cost of the officials at the game. Okay. And if you know athletics, that's the biggest cost that you incur with running games and your expenses and everything. So that was actually funded out of the millage, which is the taxpayer approved millage.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get that money from. And so it's important, so again, we're paying for their biggest expense, but we still need people to come and watch the games to bring in the ticket revenue to be able to support the teams financially.
Yeah. So, it's not cheap. It is not cheap to run a basketball program for 4 months it's just, I think one of the things that truly, I always knew the expenses at a professional college level, but it really stunned me to see how much it costs to run just a basic high school athletic program for a season. And I'm not even talking about football. I'm talking about basketball, or, because, 2,000 people don't go watch a basketball game, but it's incredible how much support these programs need. So I beg people to please go see them in person, give a little bit if you can, and because every little bit helps. Go ahead.
Yeah, you and I both have been to the middle school basketball championships.
Oh yeah,
they draw about 2,000.
Yeah,
I would love for every game to be like that.
Yeah,
I think that would be awesome if we could get the people out in the community to come out and I think once you start doing it, it becomes a lot of fun, and then you want to do it more and more. And the more people who want to do it, the more fun it becomes.
Yeah, and it's happened here before. People used to, try to, you had to look in the windows there at Rockledge, when they had those windows, you had to look in the windows there to watch Rockledge play Cocoa. And I know that's a rivalry, but the same thing holds true for Astronaut and Titusville. And so just support your local team, and that is certainly doing your community good. Here with Kevin Robinson, the county's top athletic director. Kevin, when you took this job 2 years ago, I'll bet you didn't know that basically everything in the world of college and high school sports was just going to change in the blink of an eye in the next 2 years, did you?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we in this job we kind of expect the unexpected. So generally the kind of pulse on things is that we look for what's happening at the college level,
Right.
and then we kind of reason through it and say, can this be implemented at the high school level? Should it be implemented at the high school level? Because it's eventually going to be, they're going to find a way to kind of craft it and shape it, to where it is going to be implemented at the high school level. So us as ADs on the high school level, it's kind of what we do, and we speculate a lot on, whether it will be, and then that way, if it does happen, then we're semi-prepared for it. I mean, obviously, wait and see how the policy comes out. But
now I'm not a big fan of NIL at the high school level, and I love the way, essentially, I mean, in a nutshell, the FHSAA framed the NIL policy where really the student and the students' families are the ones that really have to be careful how they approach this, how they handle this. The student athlete has to be the one to make sure. Now, look, don't get me wrong, the schools will be punished too, but what is your feeling on this? And have you seen any type of an effect in Brevard County with name, image, and likeness and student athletes?
We talked about this at the national level also. These are conversations that are going on, at the national level. You hear it at conventions and AD conventions at the national level. There's only a small fraction of a percent of athletes that this affects.
Correct.
And we're talking about of the elite athletes when it comes to high school. The real NIL deals are going to come when those elite athletes go to college.
Correct.
So it really doesn't affect a whole lot of people.
Right.
I think it's one of those things where they felt a lot of pressure to implement NIL in some way, shape, or form in Florida. And so because other states had adopted it, and I don't know if there was the fear that you're going to lose athletes or what the reason was behind that, but I think there's a lot of pressure for them to
do that, especially from the South.
But there's a lot of restrictions on it, and that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Right.
When you look at that policy, the FHSA policy on name, image, and likeness, it's there's a lot of restrictions on it, and in particular, the one that gets a lot of people is NIL collectives. Those are not allowed. And that's really what a lot of people are thinking is the NIL collective idea, and it's not allowed, and you still can't recruit kids.
Nope.
You still can't use this to recruit kids. This is really between the athlete, counseled by their parents, and any legal counsel that they may have. Which if it's a substantial deal, then you really need to have legal counsel. But it's between them and the person that's offering the NIL deal. And in fact, when it comes to our involvement in that, it doesn't allow for any one of the school's athletic interests to be involved in any shape or form with those NIL deals. So
yeah, it's like this, right? I mean, it's like, hey, just make sure you adhere to the rules.
Yeah.
I guess the issue, you have the NIL. I guess the issue is and as a coach, you were a wrestling coach, and so every coach in this state since 2016 has been affected by the transfer policy, House Bill 7029 in 2016, and it gets, a lot of people say, well, it's not that bad, or it is that, but I think the reality, Kevin, is there is a competitive imbalance because of it. And listen, this is simply yet another thing where the FHSAA can't touch this. If they can't touch this, you guys can't touch this. This is a state lawmaker thing. So kind of, what are the options here? What can counties do? What can you guys do with this to maybe kind of restore a little bit of the competitive balance again? Or is there anything at all?
Well, I mean, I think when you talk about competitive balance, it's not necessarily between schools. It's actually what we see is that it's competitive balance between programs within sports.
Right.
So this school may be really good at these sports right here, like these few sports right here.
Right.
Then they're maybe not so great at some of the other ones, right? And then other schools may be really good at those sports that they're not good at, and so that's really what I think a lot of this created, and many years ago, a lot of the old timers said that this was going to happen and kind of foresaw that this was going to happen. Is that when people have free will and they have the opportunity to vote with their feet, which they do with this now, then they're going to go wherever they feel is best for them, which is going to serve in their best interest, from an individual standpoint. And that's what they're going to do. I mean, humans naturally do that. They look to forward their own self-interest,
As I looked into Georgia's new law, or the Georgia High School Athletic Association, and what they did about this, or trying to do about this, it's not all that different than what the FHSAA imposes in terms of violations if they catch you doing illegal recruiting. I guess it's tough to legislate because, I mean, forever and a day a student can transfer for academic reasons. It almost feels fair that student, as long as their grades are up to par, should be able to transfer for athletic reasons as well. I mean, stands to reason, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what they're going to do.
Right.
That's what they're going to do anyway. And if you tell them they can only transfer for academic reasons, then they're going to say it's an academic reason. Yeah,
you're going to open a can, and so it's a no-win situation. I mean, I don't like some of the things or some of the tactics that I know are being used out there to bring kids to particular schools or that school. And I'm not just talking about football. I mean, this goes on in all sports. It is what it is. It is, and not just in Brevard County, it's across the entire state of Florida. It is the Wild West at times between these transfer periods. But with that said, I think our community does a pretty good job at times of policing themselves. Thank goodness for social media. And I'll just leave it at that right there. But do you foresee a day when state lawmakers will make any changes to this policy? I don't myself. Do you?
I think you can count on lawmakers to make changes. Whether they're good changes or whether they're going to move you in a positive direction, remains to be seen. I think all the changes is what's gotten us to this point, right?
That's right.
I mean, whether it is good or bad really depends on your position and your perspective. Like if you talk to some coaches, they may say it's bad, it's awful, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to high school sports. And then you talk to other coaches and they're like, no, it's great. It's awesome. It just really, again, it depends on your perspective. Parents, the same kind of thing, the truth is that, the parents are always going to do what's best for their kids, what they feel is best for their kids. And this kind of allows them to do that. So, even when this first came out, my thought pattern as a coach, because I was a coach at the time,
Right.
My thought pattern was, okay, if kids can go absolutely anywhere that they want to go and for any reason or whatever, um, it's incumbent upon me to build the best program possible, that focuses on the best overall outcomes for my student athletes. And I think, some other people have done that too.
Well
Um,
said.
and I think if you do that and you focus on that, you don't have to recruit. I mean, you'll find that there's a lot of speculation out there about this place or that place recruits, and if they've got proof, then they probably need to come forward with it. But the truth is that a lot of the top programs don't have to recruit. They just provide an appealing type product, if that makes sense.
That's
kind of speak for themselves.
That's a great point, because you look at a school like Astronaut, and I was, in our spring football recaps with Logan Halleck, he said, I asked him, I can't remember one transfer since Logan Halleck has been there, and he hasn't had one. And that's a school that lost a ton of football players prior to his arrival, transferring to other schools. So, yeah, and you look at a place like Merritt Island, yeah, they get the occasional transfer out, but for the most part, student athletes don't leave the island. They come to the island. They don't leave it. So that's well said, Kevin. I think that's a point that's often overlooked, is a lot of the onus can be placed on what are you doing to keep your kids.
Yeah. And if you're keeping your kids that you have, you're going to attract more, like whatever you're doing seems to be working, and you're going to attract more kids. And you won't even, you won't even need to talk to anybody or do any of the things that people, are saying that people are doing. You won't need to do any of that. And I don't know how much of it is actually true. I do see all the allegations that come in about schools, and I do see the responses on allegations and everything like that too. So I feel like I have a pretty good, my finger on the pulse of that pretty good, in this county.
Good.
So,
as we get a couple more for you here, as we get set to wrap up with Brevard County's top athletic director, Kevin Robinson. It seems like February on, at least once a week, I'm picking my phone up or getting a phone call about a new head coaching change in Brevard County in any sport. We've got a lot of them in a lot of different sports. Is this a cycle? I know normally sometimes we get one or two, but we've had a lot in a lot of sports. Is this concerning, or is this just the cycle of things as it pertains to coaching?
I think it depends a lot on what you're talking about when it comes to that. Are you talking about overall? Are you talking about just football?
Overall, I think when you look at, if you go from the end of the football season and you look at, every year we've got 5 to 7 new head football coaches. This year, it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like there are new basketball coaches everywhere, boys and girls in the county this year. It just feels across the board like an inordinate amount of coaching changes. And I was just curious if there was a reason for this, or is this just one of these things that is just happened this year?
So to a certain degree, I think it's a product of the landscape that's been created, with all the changes in the laws and policies.
Gotcha.
So I wish that, the legislators would understand that when they make these changes, it not only changes what they wanted to change, but has a ripple effect on everything else.
Correct.
Right. So to a certain degree, I think it is a product of the landscapes, so similar to the parents and the athletes, like we talked about, many of the coaches vote with their feet also,
Gotcha. Yeah,
so
true.
If there's something that's going on within their school, within their program, that is, maybe not to their liking, or maybe something that they don't feel like they're going to be able to change, or, whatever the case may be, they will reach a certain point to where they when opportunity arises then they jump on that opportunity, right? But here's the thing: is that an opportunity has to arise, and then when that happens, it creates an opportunity for movement for other people to then consider and making moves. So then you get the coaching carousel that goes on, and you see that in college a lot too.
Yes, you do.
So once a big program opens up, somebody jumps on that, because they're like, that's a big opportunity for me.
Right.
And then their position opens up, and then somebody else says, hey, that's a big opportunity for me.
Right.
So then it kind of has to play itself out. The coaching carousel has to kind of play itself out, for that period of time. And it happens not only in football, but like you said, it happens in basketball.
Right.
Look at, Palm Bay just won the state championship, and then within a month, their coach had taken an opportunity at MCC.
Right. No doubt.
That opens up that kind of that it's a big opportunity, right? Like,
right.
Who would take over Palm Bay as a team that just won the state championship, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. And then the coach at Palm Bay comes from down south, and then you got so on and so on. Well, let me ask you this: we talked about this when you first took the job in terms of coaches' pay, and I know stipends have gone up. I know recently the Florida Coaches Coalition was in Tallahassee, and a lot of our coaches from Brevard County joined them up there. We saw Ryan Schneider speaking on the 6 o'clock news to state legislators about the need for more pay for coaches. Kind of where are we with that?
Yeah, so as you said, we had a lot of representation up in Tallahassee that day. Dr. Ramjet is in the Florida Coaches Coalition. They're doing a really good job of raising awareness, across the board about coaches' pay, in the state. And I think that's their mission. That's what they're looking to do, is to raise awareness. And I think they're achieving that goal when it comes to that. So now there's raising awareness. And then there's also the monetary aspect of it too. I mean, obviously the money has to be there in order to make it happen. Lawmakers could pass a law saying you need to increase coaches' pay by X percentage, but if the funding is not also there, then it falls into another category of unfunded mandates, that we see, happening out of Tallahassee sometimes, Yeah. So, in terms of, for us, from my perspective, as somebody who coached for 17 years, I mean, I'm all for, getting coaches, the pay that they deserve. You're never going to get paid what you're worth.
Nope.
If you're getting paid what you're worth, then you're probably, you need to do more if you're actually getting paid what you're worth. But I think that there's a lot that's being done. There's a lot that has been done. And again, bringing up the millage, we were able to increase coaches' pay by 30%. Those supplements went up by 30% with the help of that millage. Right. So that was huge. That's in my memory, that's the biggest, bump in those supplements that we have ever had.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say, Kevin, too, that, look, I mean, being a high school coach in Florida in any sport, you're never going to get rich. And it's a lot of it still has to be done because it's something you love to do. I mean, it still has to be for the pure love of this, doesn't it? I mean, coaches need to understand that too. And I love every one of them, and I want to see them all make $100,000 a year, coach. And I want to see them make what they make in Georgia. But unfortunately, that's not the case here. So a lot of what they do has to be done from the heart, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does, before I ever got paid to coach, I volunteered to coach, and that was not only at the high school level, but also at the college level. You've got volunteers at the college level, and I did both of those, during my early years. And you do it because, like you said, you love to do it. You enjoy doing it. You obviously don't want to be losing money doing it. And that's kind of where you run into some of this stuff. So many coaches put so much into it, that, even with a supplement, sometimes it ends up costing them money throughout the year.
Yes.
And you don't want that to happen.
No.
You certainly don't want that to happen, because then people start getting negative, and you don't, why am I doing this if I'm losing money? And it can be a tough sell sometimes, especially for the younger coaches, who are maybe just getting into coaching.
Yep.
That's where we find it, a lot of times.
And that's what we need. We need the younger generation as well. And it's good to see it. It's funny. I've seen an influx of a lot of student athletes stepping up to become youth coaches. I've seen a few at Cocoa do it. I've seen a few down south do it. The football players that are now coaching youth on Saturday morning, which I think is a terrific thing. One more for you here. So the floor is yours, Kevin Robinson. And I appreciate you spending so much time with us here. And so I want to know, can you give us, maybe can you let us in on something, some of the goals, what you want to accomplish here in the near, what you'd like to see happen for athletics in Brevard County moving forward, and maybe something we can look forward to specifically?
So I think the biggest thing is, doing what we're doing and continuing to expand sports opportunities whenever it's, feasible to do so, especially at the youth level. The youth level is so critical, and you talked about like those coaches, getting involved with the youth level. That is the most critical level, like anywhere. If you can get a kid to fall in love with something when they're 8 years old, they will absolutely love it when they're 18 years old. That's where you get those elite athletes, and you don't get that way by kind of grinding and having kids doing all kinds of hard, rigorous training and stuff like that. You get them to do it by just making the sport fun, introducing the sport, making it fun, and making them fall in love with the sport. All the hard work will take care of itself, and all that will come. The more the kids love the sport, the more they'll do it, the more they'll work hard, the more they'll want to work hard and be there all the time. And the longer they do it, the better they are, and that's the idea with adding all those opportunities at the youth level is getting kids to fall in love with sport. And that's what I emphasize to those coaches at the elementary school level. There's technical aspects to sports, but you don't want to focus so much on the technical aspect that you forget for it to be fun. It's got to be fun. It's absolutely got to be fun at that level.
And I think that when I just watching and again the youth level, when we go out and stream a youth football game, we did Little League softball this year. I mean, there's nothing like it. I mean, there just isn't. It's the purity of the game, and watching parents and coaches. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of things there's a lot of outside noise, but when you get in between those fences or on those fields, it is really a beautiful thing to watch. I mean, it really is, and it's a lot of fun. And I can tell you this, Kevin, it's what keeps us going. It is what keeps us going. And on that note, I want to thank you for, allowing Brevard Sports Network to still continue to be a big part of Brevard County sports, not just high school sports, but all sports. We love what we do, and there's that word again. If you love what you do, and so we thank you for taking some time with us today. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I appreciate everything that you guys do. Also, you guys are a critical part to everything. Kids and parents love to see themselves on BSN.
I appreciate that.
It's a big deal.
That means a lot coming from you, and I appreciate that. And so you and your family have a great 4th of July, and we'll catch up with you as the season draws a little closer. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
Yes, sir. That is Kevin Robinson, the head athletic director for Brevard County Schools, and always a great I can't believe we almost won an hour. I plotted these things out, and I was like, there's no way we're going to go this long. Well, we did. It's just great conversation to have, and more importantly, I know Kevin Robinson wants to have the conversation. He's always been terrific about that. So we want to thank Mr. Robinson for coming on tonight. For all of you out there, for Caleb Brown, our producer, I'm Alan Slaughter-Zinski. One-on-one with Kevin Robinson, the head athletic director for Brevard County. Have a great 4th of July weekend, everyone.